Well, hey, you guys, and welcome to the Beyond Sundays podcast. We are so excited you are joining us today for a special episode with two fun friends in the studio with me today. I've got Braden back in the studio as my co-host.
Back again.
Hey. And also Jesse Davis. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So, before we dive into today's conversation, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So my name is Braden Crow. I am the Associate Missions and Outreach Pastor here. I've been on staff for 7 years, and I'm married to my wife, Victoria. She teaches kindergarten. She has immense patience, and I have a 1-year-old named Caroline. And so she's currently she's now walking. And
so she's busy.
Yeah, so cabinets are no longer safe. She's in the teething phase, so nights are kind of crazy. But that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my little family.
Sweet. Jesse, how about you?
Yep. So I'm Jesse. I married. We've been married for 18 years, I think. Yeah, something like that. And then we've got, as of actually this afternoon when we're recording, we'll have 3 boys. So I've got a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and then a 2-year-old that we're adopting this afternoon.
Wow.
So congratulations.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're just
so awesome.
we try to survive. So, so I've been at Beltway since I was in middle school, actually. Kind of came up through within youth ministry, interned, was on staff for a little while, and then now we've got a management company, we've got a couple of businesses, and then I work primarily with other business owners doing kind of coaching and development, really kind of more along just spiritual and leadership development. So
That's awesome. Well, we were talking about influence today, and I just was curious if you were to take the sum of your life, and think about who's had the most influence on your spiritual journey, on your walk with God. Who would that person be?
yeah, the most influence, I mean, gosh, there's probably several folks that kind of come to mind through that just at different phases and seasons of life, influence from leaders or peers or, that sort of thing. And so even when I think of those kind of relationships, I think of it like the picture that I have is like a compass, like a directional compass. You've got 4 points on a compass, north, south, east, and west. And each of those points are like different types of really relationships, right? Or opportunities for influence to happen. So on the east and west, you've got peer accountability type of relationships. And so, probably significant ones on that level would definitely be Brittany, my wife, and just her encouragement along the way is super influential.
She is the best encourager.
Yeah, she is big time.
Huge gift of hers.
Yeah. And then, some close friends along the way. And then, at that north point of that compass are kind of some more just mentor type folks that have poured into me a little bit further down the way. And I mean, that started back early on in the beginning with, some guys like Rick Blackington and Chase Payne, and then, and then kind of fast forward even more recently, there's been some guys in my life like Robert Sullivan has been a real mentor to me in a lot of ways. And so I've been fortunate that the Lord's really kind of surrounded me at those different points with some great folks.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question, but why do you trust them to allow their influence to affect you? What would be the reason why you allow, actually trust them to do that and hold that space?
No, that's good. I think alignment is a big piece of that, that we're aligned. I know that they are chasing after the kingdom of God and that they're fully committed and all. And so there's a credibility that happens there. And so I really keep kind of a smaller, really inner circle within that those are going to be the most influential to me. And it's kind of, the closer you get into that circle, the more that alignment is critical and important. And so for those folks, they're definitely in that inner circle piece of it. And it takes trust is probably the big word that you said within that to get to it.
Yeah, I even think about, the people that I have given the greatest influence in my life, and kind of the guiding principles for me, and I'm sure it lines up with you too, is I'm looking at these people down the road and I'm seeing, okay, they have a proven track record of, the values for me of, okay, I want a God-loving, God-fearing family, and okay, who are the people in my life that I see them doing this? I see the fruit in their lives. I see how they've dedicated their lives, and they've centered their values around, raising a family to just love Jesus. And that's a guiding principle for me, or the way that we want to steward finances, or the way that we see work, or the way that we lead, and so that's kind of the guiding principles that I've used, and I'm hearing you kind of say the same thing.
Yeah, credibility.
Absolutely,
I guess would be the
yeah.
word, right? There's credible people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. The Matthew 5:13 and 14 says that we're supposed to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. That's what Jesus himself called us to be. He called us to be influencers. Yes, we have people in our lives who influence us. I mean, we're at stages of our lives where we are looking to the people who are ahead of us to glean
Yeah.
wisdom from, and just learn, like, how do we live this life in a God-honoring way in the season I'm in, and steward the things you've given me, Lord, and all those things. But at the same time, we're also called to be influencers, right? We've got our families we influence.
Yeah.
We have our spouses we influence. We have friends. We have places that we work. And I mean, you mentioned this earlier, like we spend 40, for those of us who work and have full-time jobs,
Yeah.
we spend 40 hours a week at work. But then there's the people that we see at the grocery store, and the barista that we get our coffee from. I mean, our sphere of influence can be quite large.
Yeah.
And so I love what Craig Rochelle says in the book. He says this: when you know who you are, you know what you're called to do. When you know who you are, you know what you're supposed to do. So, Jesse, I guess I have a question for you. When did it happen? When did these kinds of things click? When you realized, man, I'm a son of the Most High God, and He has called me to be an influencer. How did you reach that conclusion?
I think that's been a process just over time of having that rooted deeper and deeper inside of me, just, working that out. And so God got a hold of me and saved me, as a teenager, and just, pretty incredible way within that. And so it was like an undeniable experience within that I was like, okay, this is real. This is legitimate. I cannot deny this. I can't shake this. And then, really through some of those early mentors even that I mentioned through that is really instilling that identity piece within that and giving me a good, solid framework of what does it mean to be a son of God? Because I don't even know at that point, what it means to be a son in general, really, And so God using the influence of a couple of men just kind of throughout my life and showing that and instilling that and being that really representative of Christ, right, is what made that begin to really take root in me and flush out. And that's still, 20 something years into really, I can say with a clear conscience, chasing after Jesus, not backsliding, not shrinking away. And it's still a process that's developing inside of me more and more.
What do you think? Because the reality is that if we know who we are and what we're supposed to do, there's still hurdles we have to jump over. I think in my own, walk with the Lord, fear was one of them. Fear was a hurdle I had to jump over. But you talked about earlier that there is a reality that the Lord pressed upon your heart that about comfortability. Could you speak into that?
No,
real quick?
absolutely. Yeah. And so kind of the context for that is we were talking about this adoption process that we've been through. And so when we got the little guy in, it was really like a extended babysitting gig is kind of what we were thinking. Just a little bit of a rescue mission here, and, it'd be temporary. And then, that kind of went on a little bit longer, and it's like, okay, well, and then we start to get attached, and then, and then it's kind of the roller coasters of the ups and downs of, saying goodbyes, and then he's not going to be here, and then he's back, and, all of that up and down, and realizing really through that, this is hard. God, I can't, this is difficult. This is hard. You talk with other people, and it's like, yeah, it's hard. But then really pressing into it and praying through it, I felt a deep conviction, and it was just a reality check that, the Lord really pressed on me, it's not that this is hard. If you're very honest with yourself, Jesse, this is inconvenient. That's it. your convenience has been disrupted. You had a very easy flow of life and things were comfortable, and then you threw a baby into the mix, and that comfort was drastically disrupted.
Yeah.
And my goodness, like it was just this picture of so much of our lives that I think we miss out on, the influence of the things that God has for us, because we get so comfortable, and we are obsessed with people with comfort. I think it's one of the greatest tools of our time that the enemy uses to just kind of sedate us as God's people, is to make us comfortable, because when we're comfortable, we're complacent and we're inward focused. That's the big danger, I think, of comfort. Comfort is about me, like perfect my little kind of sphere here in my bubble and keep it nice and comfortable. And I don't think the gospel really affords us that opportunity. And I don't think at our very core that's actually even what we want. The reality of what we're looking for in our souls is peace. And comfort is counterfeit peace, is all that it is.
Yeah.
It's a tool the enemies use to help us to settle, to make this inward focus.
Yeah.
And so then we're being influenced, right? Like you said from the beginning, it's either influence is going to happen. We're either going to be influenced or we're going to be influencers as salt and light. And whenever you're in a comfortable state, you are not acting as salt and light, because salt and light disrupt things, right? Light goes into darkness, penetrates it, and changes it.
Yeah.
That's not a comfortable act that takes place. So that's probably one of our bigger enemies to it, for sure.
That's a good filter of just asking yourself, am I comfortable or am I full of peace? I like that.
And is this peace the peace that comes from?
Right. Is this the peace of God, or is this the lack of something uncomfortable?
Right.
Well, I like that you
You
use
know?
that word counterfeit too. I mean, it's true. It's an illusion, right? It's sedating the turmoil inside, or the call even, and just suppressing that to a place where, it's the comfort piece for sure. I love something that you said earlier before we started recording, where you got to the point where the questions were there, like, do we really want to do this? This is inconvenient for our family. It is still hard. I mean, the reality is when you do foster and adoption or anything like that, it is difficult. It's not an easy journey. But there was something one of your sons said that kind of flipped the switch for you. Would you mind sharing that?
No, absolutely. So it was really kind of in the beginning when we got that first initial call, and we were at the table. The boys kind of overheard the conversation a little bit, of what was going on. And so we hang up with the caseworker, and Brittany and I are talking like, okay, do we really want to do this? We had just kind of done that and had a little girl, and she had just gone back. I mean, it was all super fresh. And we're like, I don't know. That's, we really want to undertake that right now, or kind of this little bit of a grieving process still. And the boys said, Dad, if there's a little kid that needs our help, why wouldn't we do it? And it was like just the weight of that reality sinking in right there of like, well, thanks a lot. This is on you guys. You guys know this, right? But that conviction of like, you're right. Like, why would we not? We're totally capable of it. Like we're resourced to do this. Like how, at the core, the conviction, like how selfish not to.
Yeah.
Right? Like how selfish of me to elevate my comfort over the safety and well-being of this kid. And it was a huge conviction point for me, for sure. And I'll tell you, through this whole process, I think that's one of the biggest things that the Lord has just been working through my heart, is that just there's more selfishness down in there than I would ever like to admit or verbalize to anybody.
And I think we get an opportunity throughout this series, honestly, to deal with that, in that selfish piece, because the Lord has not called us to live a life for ourselves. He said, when you accept me, you lay down your cross, you lay down your life, you pick up your cross and you follow me, is what you do. And that is a call. It is a calling, but it's all of our callings, right?
It's costly. But like, I've never met your kiddos, but that question came from their hearts, because I guarantee you that's how you influence your home. That's how you and Brittany influence your home. And So that's like even just encouraging to me and challenging to me as
Yeah.
I have a 1-year-old who, the extent of her words are mama and dada, but that's the level of influence that I want to see bubble up inside of her, that it's not something I have to pull out of her, but it's something that she just absorbs from the way that we lead our home. And so that's encouraging, even just seeing your kids ask that question, because that came from somewhere.
Right. No, thank you. Yeah. And it's not to our credit, that's for sure. I mean, there's obviously parenting involved, but I think some of it's being well aware of, like, we don't know what we're doing here. Right?
None of us do.
We don't know what we're doing. But I think it leads great too into some of this idea of influence and these strategies and commitments to influence and influencing through our prayers.
Oh, yeah.
And that's probably been the biggest piece of that with our kids, because everybody, your first kid, you don't know what you're doing. You can read all the books you want, you can geek out on whatever, like you could talk to people, but when it's your kid, it's different, and we're just figuring it out, right?
Yep.
And so that's where I personally rely heavily on that. Like I know that he knows. And I know that God has given me this gift, that I have his ear in prayer.
That's
and
so
so
good.
I'm going to invest everything I can into that and just invite him in, because he wants to bring his influence and he wants to bring the power of his kingdom. But it's like so many times we don't even tap into that.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't ask.
Right.
And he's a gentleman, so he's not just going to go push the door open and come right through, but he's like, hey, just invite me. Like,
Right.
I want to be here. I want to be involved.
Yeah.
And I want you to walk in power, right?
Right.
In your day in, day out life. I think you're right. We underestimate the part of prayer in influence, not only in our home, in the environment in our home, and the way we raise our children, the way we speak to our spouse, I mean, all those things, but also in the world we live in the
Yeah.
people that we do life with, or the people we may encounter. I think we often forget how powerful prayer really, truly is, because it's a conversation, a dialogue with the God of the universe, and he listens. He hears our prayers. He sees our heart,
Yeah.
and his desire is to speak to us, right? So that's an area where absolutely we have to remember. And I think the book talks about how we can use our prayers to actually influence the world around us, because prayer matters. It does affect things. It changes things, but there are other examples and ways in which we can be an influence to the world around us. Do you mind speaking into that? How in your life, I mean, I know you've got a job where you're influencing a lot of people, a lot of business owners and all those kinds of things. Can you speak into ways in which you encourage other people to use their influence for God's kingdom?
No, absolutely. I think some of it starts just with having a right perspective and a right understanding of that. One, circling back to the idea of, if you know who you are, then you know what to do. And so as God's people, right, we're called to represent him, to be his ambassadors first and foremost. And so at a very foundational level, like, this is really a matter of obedience and being who we're called to be. And so if we're not walking in that, if we're not surrendered to that, we're being disobedient.
Yeah.
To a very elementary command there. So that, I think that's a big piece of that. Another aspect of it is really having a view of eternity continually. So often, it's easy, and especially with leaders and, those that have been kind of given a lot to steward or to manage, is we get honed in on kind of building our own little empires here and writing our own little stories. And what we've got to do is learn how to make that shift to get out of that box. That really it's not about me trying to write my own story. It's about me trying to add value to as many people as I can. And that's the way Jesus worked and operated, right? And I think the Lord gave me a picture a while back that I really felt like kind of illustrated it really well for me and clicked. And what it was is I was walking and just kind of praying, and God showed me a book, like a really thick, like decorative coffee table book. And it's probably because I'm a little bit of a nerd and I do like books, but there's just this beautiful binding, and I mean, something you would sit out on a display. And so, and I sensed God saying at the time, like, this is your book, Jesse. Like, I've written a book, everybody's story. Your life is a story, and this is yours. And it was super encouraging. I was like, well, that's pretty cool. Like, you gave me a thick book. Maybe I'll live a long time. I don't know. Like, it's, it looks really nice and, decorative here. And, but then it was like this kind of camera panned out, and there was this bookcase. There was a whole bunch of books all over this big bookcase, similar to that book, just different sizes and colors. And the Lord said, your name is in every one of those books on that bookcase. You played a role and are playing a role in their stories.
Wow.
And it was just super humbling. I mean, it was like I had to stop. I couldn't keep walking. I was like, this is wild. Thank you, God, you've been gracious to you. Like, I know me. Like, for whatever reason, you've seen fit to, to make this available to me. And then the Lord said, kind of pan that picture out, and that bookcase was one among many, and just this big library. And the Lord said, if you will continue to lean into me and make a top priority to add value and contribute to as many other stories as you can, your name will be in every one of these books in this room.
Wow.
And it was like just
What a
this
picture.
weight of this
Yeah.
that it was like, oh my goodness, what a life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's, the reality of that is that is what we're all called to do. Like, there's nothing unique or special about me in that by any means. Trust me. Like, there's not. I believe that that's available to every single one of us,
Absolutely.
wherever we're at. And if we'll take the focus off of just trying to write our own story and try to make an intentional effort to be a positive influence to anybody we encounter. And it's those that, may be really close to us, that we interact with day in and day out at work within this 40 hours, or maybe it's at the grocery store or wherever it may be. We have that opportunity, to brighten somebody's day, to add a positive kingdom type of impact. And I think that's the nature of the kingdom of God too, right? Mm-hmm. Whenever the kingdom advances, whenever light goes into darkness, it changes things. Mm-hmm. It changes an environment.
Yeah.
And so, the way that we live and the way that we act should bring that about and should make that happen wherever it is. And big or small, it may be that I've laid out and presented the entire gospel to somebody and that takes place, but it may be as simple as just an encouraging word or a smile at
Absolutely.
the grocery store. You know, I mean, you mentioned Brittany earlier as the most encouraging person, and she definitely is. And she doesn't have like a big, platform or stage through that, but the impact, right? The stories that she's involved in whenever it's the end of the days of her life, I guarantee will be well spent. Because I remember early on in our marriage, we were married maybe a year or two, and she had made a statement, and it stuck with me this whole time. And she said, she was talking about work, and she was a teller at the time at the credit union, and she said, really all I want to do is just make people's day a little bit better after I get to interact with them than they were before. And I thought, that's so profound. Like,
well, that's shining a light,
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not even complex. It's not. She doesn't have to we don't have to solve all these people's problems. We don't have to do it. Like, we're just being the light. Mm-hmm. And if we can commit today to be the light to anybody that bumps up against us.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, if we can commit to be the light to anybody that bumps up against us, and we do that for the totality of your life, right? One day, when we get the privilege to stand before the living God and give the account of our lives, like, I can't imagine what gets unfolded within that. I mean, it's going to be a beautiful picture.
And I hear you saying that, like, if we're going to put some practicals on what does it look like to influence others, it is through our actions and what we do, and through our words and what we say. We know that the word of God says that there is life and death in the power of the tongue, right?
Right.
And so we know the power of our words and the impact that can have and influence. I mean, I know we could probably tell stories forever of words that have really mattered, spoken rightly by someone that we know or don't know that had a huge impact on us. I can think of, several major words that were given to me, spoken to me at just the right time, that this person didn't even think it was anything of it, but to me it meant the world. And that is one of the ways in which we can be an influence to others, but it's also in our attitude, right? In how we can show the love of Jesus even on a bad day, right?
Right.
So, how does it look, and what is it like? Give some practical examples of ways in which either you've been influenced or you have used your influence to bless people through your actions, words, or your attitude.
What do you got there, sir?
This is actually something that we talk about a lot with whenever I come home at the end of the day and we talk about Victoria's classroom. And,
Yeah.
There is no way I could ever be a teacher. It's just the level of responsibility and the amount of work that goes into it. And, Victoria's a kindergarten teacher. And so you start off the year literally like, I don't know my own name, let alone write it, to the point of, okay, it's first grade. And now it's, at the end of the year, you got to send them off into first grade. And just Victoria does such a good job of just her level of influence over these kids. And, I've been able to see her just speak life over them and speak encouragement over them and call things out in
That's
them.
beautiful.
And so anyway, it's just and I think that I have so many stories of, me growing up in grade school and my teachers doing the same thing. They're still, I still have relationship with teachers that I had who called things out in me and spoke things over me. And just now that I'm in a position of leading people and, I oversee the internship here and give kind of oversight into that area, and these young students who want to grow into ministry and step into new things, and they're unsure of what they're called to do, but they know they want to serve, the Lord with their entire lives. It's fun to see a reversal of, I've had an entire life of people speaking life over me, and now it's an opportunity to do that with them. And so that's how I see it in, day out. That's how I see it in Victoria. And yeah.
And shout out to all the teachers out there. You guys are crushing it. Keep going. You're doing incredible hard work.
Yes.
I can't even fathom it.
Yep.
And blessings on your day to day. I hope all the kids do all the things that they need to do and stay in line. But how about you, Jesse? Like, what does it look like to influence with words and actions in your everyday life?
Yeah, it's one. It just starts with having eyes for it.
Yeah.
Right. Eyes outside of myself to serve, and then practically just asking yourself the question, like, why should I not help out with this?
Yeah.
Like, why should I? Sometimes it's like, we get into pray about it. It's like, well, let me pray about it. God, should I do this? Should I, And
Well, it's
it's
the
like,
same question your
went
son
off the
asked.
hook.
Why
Right.
would we
Right.
not
Yeah.
help?
But if you just reverse engineer that and go, why would I not do this?
Yeah.
Like, why should I not? Like, maybe that's a prayer we should
Yeah.
pray. God, should I not help this person? Like, we're driving by and the tires fly and said, God, do you not want me to just help them right now? Like, we'd probably be doing a whole lot more serving and helping and acts of love to people.
Yeah.
Like, even within that, right?
Every chance. Yeah.
And then within the words and our actions, are we pointing to Jesus through
Yes.
this, and are we trying to represent Him well? And the practicality of that is endless, right? Buying somebody's meal or a cup of coffee, seeing somebody that's down and just giving a positive, encouraging word to them, or being generous with our time or our money.
Yeah.
Any of those types of things, we're just displaying these acts of love and service to point to Him. But we got to stop looking at ourselves first of all, and have eyes for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the second thing with that is we've got to like uncompartmentalize our lives. Right? And so it's like we've got, serving and church over here, and then we've got our family time over here, and then we've got work over here. And I don't think the gospel gives us that privilege to just put all these walls and things up, right? You talked about the workplace, and you've got 40 hours a week here that you're doing, right? I remember hearing J.D. Greer talk one time, and he said that he was studying the book of Acts, and he said there's 40 miracles listed here throughout the book of Acts. 39 of those miracles happened outside of the church setting, like in the marketplace and in the world. Like, but we put up these walls, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, and so if we will be the hands and feet of Jesus, right? That's our
good.
calling as his people. It's not something that we can just delegate out to, folks within the church vocational world. Like, this is all of us. We're all in this, and we're all called again to live this out.
Yeah, I think that part that you shared about having eyes to see, that's probably a conviction for me today, I would say, is because I'm not praying that prayer very regularly. Like, Lord, who do you want me to see today?
Yeah.
Is going to be a new prayer of mine as I think about, like, my heart's desire is to influence. Like, that's my heart's desire. I hope I'm influencing my family, my children especially, as I'm raising them in the way that they should go. But I also hope that I'm an influence to the people around me and the people I don't know, the people that I may not see tomorrow, right? But I saw them today. And just to pray the prayer of, Lord, I want my eyes off me, and I want to get my eyes on the people you desire for me to see today.
Yeah.
And then ask the question, what could that look like? And be okay that it's inconvenient, because there's going to be times where it's going to be inconvenient. I think someone said this in a previous conversation, and they said, it's so much easier sometimes just to write a check.
Yeah.
To write the check, serve in that way financially, sow and invest, which that's awesome if you write a check. Fantastic. But time is the commodity that is so much harder to give to Jesus in that moment and to give to another person, right? To it's a cost. And we have to remember that, following Jesus is costly. We got to daily count the costs. We've talked about that so much in this series.
Well, you said it off air, so say it on air.
Now that we're recording.
You said it really, really well, but you were talking about just the opportunity of stewardship.
Yes.
And just the kingdom's greatest resource. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we're talking kind of the context of that, just with these business owners and leaders, and really understanding that, leadership, influence, right? And I would put leadership is influence. That's what that is a stewardship. And it's a stewardship of God's most valuable resource. It's people.
Yeah.
Right? So the blood of Christ was not shed or spilled out for anybody's bottom line or productivity levels. It's for these men and women that we have touches with day in and day out.
That's really good.
That's
And when we
beautiful.
see the weight of that stewardship, that changes some things.
Yeah.
Or it should change some things if our heart has actually been transformed and we're regenerate and filled with God's Spirit. That perspective and that perspective of just the timeline of eternity,
That's so key. Yeah.
changes it all.
Yeah.
It's what you're saying is, it's resonating in my spirit, because influence is a long game.
Yes.
It is. And just as you mentioned it with the word picture, or the vision that God gave you about the books, and that your name was in those books, other people's names were in those books too.
Yeah.
Right.
And we get an opportunity to sow a seed, right? To sow a seed. We may not be the ones that get to reap the harvest this side of eternity. But again, influence is a long game.
Right.
And if we remember and keep that eternal perspective in the forefront of our mind, and just see human beings as eternal human beings with the possibility of entering into relationship with Jesus and being with him forever one day, right? In his presence, as you mentioned earlier, like, that is huge. And so I think my follow-up question for you in this is, how do you bring, like, practically, and thinking about using our influence to share the gospel, to share the love of Jesus, yes, through our actions, but how do you specifically bring Jesus into your conversations with people?
Well, the basic reality of it is you talk about what you love,
That's good.
right? That's going to be it, right? Somebody enters a dating relationship and they will never stop talking about that other person, right? It's like, chill out here a little bit, like, you're good, right? And whatever it may be, the next big thing for anybody, they're going to go on and on and on about it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a true principle. And so if I love Jesus, like I love Jesus, I'm going to talk about him. If I'm not talking about him, and I'm talking about other things with the majority of my time, it's a very clear indicator of what's inside of my heart.
Yeah.
And so it's not something I think that we just, have to manufacture or script or go about, well, here's my, verses that I lay out to anyone at any given time, or, the argument that I'm just ready to make right here. It's, if you really loved. If you really know Jesus, you're really going to love him.
Yeah.
And if you love him, you are going to talk about him.
That's
You're
good.
going to invite him into these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to point other people to him.
Yeah. It's the fruit of that love. Because it multiplies. Like that's what the love
Yeah.
of the kingdom does. And the kingdom advances. It's all about multiplication. He is a God of abundance.
Yeah.
And he continues to advance his kingdom. And the crazy thing is that he desires to partner with imperfect human beings to influence the world. Like that is, Jesus said to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That is a huge call. It is our number one ministry, which is to share his love with others and to share the reality of who he is. And the truth is, if we're not growing in that, the knowledge and the understanding of that love, like the experience of that love, then that's an indicator for us that we got to grow in his love,
Yeah.
right? We got to get baptized once again in his
Yeah.
love and allow that to soak every single inch of our hearts.
Yeah.
So that from that place, from that place of knowing who we are, knowing who he is, the overflow, as you
Yeah.
were speaking, you're going to talk about it. It's going to be a part of your lives. Influence is going to come naturally to you. And what I want to say too is like, I think sometimes we throw around the word leader and it scares people a little bit because they don't see themselves as leaders. What would you say to encourage people who might be in that boat?
No, that's great. And I think that is definitely true across the board. And I think really what we've all got to realize is that I think there's one like kind of qualifier that God's going to give for anybody to be a leader, right? And it's just, are you going to be faithful?
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's really all that it requires is, are you going to be faithful? Are you going to be willing and available to be faithful? If you will just say yes to him, that's it. He's the qualifier of it all. Like there's not an education level. It's not an experience level. God is solely looking for willing people. That's it. And that's the beauty of his kingdom. I mean, you just look at the jokers that Jesus put together to start this whole thing with. Like, there's not any more unqualified ragtag bunch that's out there. But it was this group of men and women at the time that were just willing.
Yeah.
Willing.
That's a
If
good
you
word.
are willing, then that's really all you need. That's it. And then the influence, again, everybody's going to have a different, platform maybe, but that really doesn't matter. And at the end of it all, I don't think that matters one bit, right? Jesus does not tell us that what we can look forward to is for him to say, well done, good and successful person. Well done, good and leader of multitudes. He says, well done, good and faithful.
Yeah.
You were willing and you were faithful. Day in and day out, really playing that long game to it, that there's just this, cumulative effect over the course of our lives that we get to look back on. And it's all of these touches and interactions at various levels that is a major influence that literally anybody can have.
That's good. I love that. That's really good. Well, I have just one more question for you, unless you've got a question. Okay. To encourage the person who is feeling like their past inhabits or like keeps them, prevents them from being able to be an influence, maybe mistakes that they've made, or they just don't feel qualified to share the love of Jesus, how would you encourage them today?
I think first I would say your feelings are fooling you. And so I would not base any decision just on how you feel, but on what the living God has said and has said in his word.
That's good.
And that he is more than capable. And for whatever reason it is, he enjoys taking the person just like you and turning the entire world upside down with. And he's done it throughout all of history. If we look through the Bible, it is the biggest bunch of sinners around that experienced him, surrendered to him, and he did amazing things through. And so the beauty of this is that we're not the qualifying committee. None of us are. It's him.
Yeah.
And if you're just willing to follow after him, he's going to take care of everything else. And he will take and give you more influence than you could ever imagine.
It's good.
It's a good word.
That's a good word. We'll end on that, man. Thank you so much for joining us today for today's conversation. So good, so powerful, so encouraging. Thanks for sharing with us today.
Thank you guys.
And you guys, remember, Jesus said so. He said so himself. You are the salt of the world and the light of the world. So let's go and be salt. Let's shake some salt. Let's shine some light. And let's be influencers for the kingdom of God. Thanks so much for listening and watching the Beyond Sundays podcast. We hope you guys have a fantastic day. And remember that God is always on the move. And he is the God of eternity. And he's moving in your life too. Beyond Sundays. See you later, guys.